Speaking of non-alcoholic drinks, honey.
We all know your passion for non-alcoholic drinks now.
What would you say was the highlight of the Portland Valentango experience? Well, discovering my newfound love for non-alcoholic drinks.
Yeah. Why? I mean, I'm trying to understand, is it the flavor? You just like the flavor of it? Well, like when you go for a non-alcoholic beer, you just enjoy that flavor. You're not after the buzz from it.
Yeah, I think I'm having to investigate that now. What is it? Why did I have so much fun drinking my non-alcoholic Negroni? Yeah, I imagine people looking at me 30 years ago going, has this man lost his mind? How much you paid a regular Negroni price, but there's no alcohol in it?
It's true, yeah.
It's usually a little bit cheaper. I mean, I did find myself wishing that it was just a little less expensive considering there was no actual alcohol in it. But, you know, it's a market. You could probably get away with charging for a non-alcoholic cocktail, an alcoholic cocktail on the lower end, the price range. But I loved it. I wanted to have a couple of them that night.
I mean, you did, because you got a Negroni and then you got the beer, the non-alcoholic beer.
Yeah. I was having a good time. I was hugging everybody.
Yeah. There were a lot of highlights for me at Valentango.
Yeah.
I love going back there because it always feels like a little bit of a homecoming, and the more I come back there, the more other people treat it that way, because I heard a lot of people say, welcome home, you know, it's like, good to have you back. And so that was cool, and it created for a lot of highlights in that way, just reconnecting with people. But I think my DJing set, I think, was a real highlight for me.
Yeah, for a lot of other people too.
Yeah. I put a lot of thought into it way ahead. It was the first time that, the moment I got word that I was going to DJ there, like I started thinking about that set then, months before. And I was really wanting to create a very particular kind of vibe. And because I thought about it so much, it produced like a very creative journey on the way to actually playing my playlist. And I thought of all these different ways that I could do it. And so I created it ahead of time, and then I worked on it some more. So it was the first time I really spent that much time on a playlist. And in my third tanda, in the middle of the set, like the second song, when it played and it finished, there was just this hush over the whole room, and then people applauded. And it was this moment of like, yes, I got it, like I did it, like I found some sort of thing that I was really wanting to create. Like people were on board with the music I was playing. And so that was like a real highlight because it was unexpected. It was the beginning of the set. Usually if there's applause, they usually happen later.
Yeah.
It was such a highlight from different directions because I was back at Valentango in this way of, like, I've been a dancer there. That's where I started dancing in Portland 10 years ago. The festival has been going on for so long. It has such a tradition to it. And then to also kind of see my contribution to that energy, that I'm really creating something together with the people there. So it was a really sweet kind of moment for me to appreciate this event in a new way. And I think during that event, Valentango, which we just came back from, I think that's when we sort of started talking about doing an episode of reviewing our experiences, because we just came back from Valentango right after El Motivo that happened the weekend before, which are these really two different events. And both of them had these incredible highlights that we processed very differently. So I think, that's kind of the beginnings of this idea that we decided to do this episode.
Mm-hmm. What's the difference between a marathon and a festival?
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great one to start with. The festival is going to have classes and performances. That's the main difference, whereas a marathon is just dancing. Mm-hmm. And so festivals, it seems, typically drive a lot of beginner dancers, to them, because you have a lot of teachers and they're teaching beginner level classes a lot of times, and it's a way for people to further their education, especially if somebody's coming from a smaller community. Mm-hmm. So a marathon does not have that aspect to it. So it will draw somebody who's more seasoned, because at that point, they're really interested in just dancing. Mm-hmm. So two very different fields. That's how I perceive it and how I think of it. But what is it like for you? Do you kind of think of them in the same terms, or do you have a different experience with them?
No, I agree with that. And normally I would think that means that the marathon might be the more physically taxing event, because it's just dancing, and that can be very tiring. But festivals seem to be really more packed. Mm-hmm. And if you want to participate in any of the classes, like, you really have to schedule out your day. You're going to start pretty early. Classes, I think, started around 11, I think, at this festival. So it just gives you enough time to, wake up at a normal Tango festival kind of time, get breakfast, go do classes, dance a little bit in the afternoon, eat a dinner, and then go back and be at the Milonga from maybe 8 when it starts, or show up 10, 11, and then possibly dance till past 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. So I did find that it was more physically demanding to be at the festival. And of course, 2 different locations. One was at home for the marathon here in LA. In Portland, we traveled for it. And so, the living situation was a little bit different. It's not as comfortable. You're not coming back to your space to kind of reset. But I did find that it felt like there was a lot more content, a lot more stuff that should be done at the festival. And so it was a lot more tiring.
Yeah, but granted, we also went there as social dancers. Like, we didn't necessarily take a lot of classes. You took 2 classes?
Yeah.
I didn't end up taking a lot of classes. So our time was spent mostly still focused on social dancing aspect of it.
Yeah.
And I found it interesting that even though, like you said, it's physically demanding, but I didn't dance as much as I danced at the marathon. So it's kind of like a paradox that the marathon, I danced probably triple the amount in terms of actual hours of dance time. And I didn't feel as tired as I felt at the festival, which my take, it might be, as you said, because of the combination of classes and milongas, but because I wasn't taking any classes, for me, it doesn't necessarily apply there. But this whole like staying up really late thing like that really affected me, because it basically, I got maybe 5 hours of sleep a night. And that automatically made my experience a lot more exhausting the next day.
Yeah.
And the marathon that we attended, which was El Motivo in LA, that marathon had that schedule of 1 to 4 p.m. and then 8 to midnight, which to me was amazing. And a lot of people commented on how rested they were the whole time that the event was happening. But I brought that up to some people at Valentango. I talked about that schedule, and it was interesting to hear people's reactions, because one guy was like, "Oh no, I need my nighttime dancing. I need to be there late at night. I can't imagine not dancing at 3 o'clock in the morning." And at that point, I realized that, yeah, I guess there's a lot of dancers who associate dancing really late at night as part of the experience. Like they kind of crave that state of delirium. But
Psychos.
yeah, that state of delirium is pretty special. And didn't you have like a really funny experience?
Well, yeah. No, I'm going to ask you about your most awkward moment. So you're prepared.
Let me start thinking about that.
It had been a long time since I danced late, and at this point in the evening, it wasn't even that late. It was like maybe just before 2. We didn't even stay for the second milonga from 2 to 6 in the morning.
Oh my God, I can't imagine.
Yeah. But I was this was deep into it. So I was already kind of suffering from prior nights, not sleeping too much. And I had that moment that we get to, right, where you're kind of like a zombie. And so you're dancing with somebody that you've never met and maybe having a conversation in between the songs. And I mean, the conversations they follow the same form usually. Where are you from? What's your name? And I was trying to find some kind of information, because those things are easy in, easy out. And I probably didn't ask it in the most elegant way, but was inquiring as to something that I might remember about this person who I was dancing with for the first time, if I ever happen to run into them again. And it didn't go so well. And it actually, the awkwardness is that it's kind of like this experience I think guys have in tango, where I kind of feel like I'm almost being #MeToo'd. you know,
like your intentions are being misinterpreted in some way.
Yeah, possibly. And so, a little context: a young dancer, probably on the newer end, but very, very good-looking girl. And later on, as I went through the experience, I thought, what her experience the entire time might have been, and like if I was a younger guy, single, maybe having a little conversation, trying to throw a little extra charm on it, might have been,
But now you're a wise married man.
Exactly. Thank you for the dance and move on. But she must have been kind of getting that a little bit, all night, or however long she'd been there, right? Like maybe she was fine not having any conversation, and she just wanted to experience the dance. So that's fair. But the sense I got was like, what are you, some dude who's trying to like get in my pants with like with like questions like that? And this is 2:00 in the morning. I think maybe the part that was awkward for me was, does she think I'm the awkward guy who's like, man, I don't really know how to talk to women, so this is the sort of formal question I ask? Or is it, which I think was more the reality, it's late at night and I'm kind of like a zombie here, and I'm sorry my questions aren't elegant or more charming. I'm not maybe in my A game at any point. But so the uncomfortableness was just when I kind of asked her to divulge some of this information, and kind of appreciate it now. She just kind of said no. Yeah. Right? Like I don't have to do that. And
well, I think the listeners want to know exactly what you said.
I said, and it's unelegant. So I'm sure that I might not remember your name or where you're from. So you have to give me something that I might be able to glom onto and remember the next time we run into each other.
So you're basically trying to tell her, hey, I want to remember you. tell me something about yourself that will help me remember next time I see you. Which is a very valid request, because especially this time that I went to this festival, it's such a trick to remember people's names. Oh my God.
I talked to somebody 20 minutes after I met them, got where they were from wrong. Fortunately, didn't get their name wrong, got their name right. But these sorts of things, it's like, I think I told you there's one woman, I thought I was capasoing the same woman I danced with an hour earlier. And then as we took the embrace, I was like, no, you're not you. You dance with a lot of people.
Yeah. And so you're trying to be nice, but you're doing it in this way that she takes as like, you're like, give me something.
Right. I'm a man. I'm privileged. And I kind of viewed it that way a little bit, like, look, I'm having a good time. The experience is one where, if you're a leader and if you want to dance a lot, like it's your playground a little bit. And I'm not saying that this is what she felt, but I've experienced this sometimes where maybe the attitude is a little bit like, oh, you just get to have so much fun, don't you? And you think you can just sort of ask me to give you some kind of little insider information on the beautiful, mysterious tapestry that is moi. And no.
You don't deserve it.
You don't deserve it. You've not been in any way charming enough.
Right.
To get that. So fair. And
wait, let me pause here. Is this happening at what point in the tanda? So we have four song tandas. When does this exchange happen in the tanda?
I actually do remember that because it kind of took place over the course of the tanda, which started from the first song. So I think it was the third. So this is the where it really got awkward was right before that last song. But it had started kind of earlier.
So it got more and more awkward, and the dance became more and more awkward, or did the dance continue being okay?
The dance continued to be okay. I mean, that last one, as I took the embrace, I really kind of remembering almost taking the embrace as I heard her and kind of saw what it was becoming and maybe was a little bit embarrassed and said, you're absolutely right. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. And I did replay in my mind as I thought about that phrasing, and I thought, what was another path that I could have gone on? It didn't happen in that moment, but maybe the hurt part of me thought, and I don't have to dance this last song. Right? And we could have walked off. And there was a part of me as I thought about that, maybe I'm like, ooh. But as I've thought about it even more, like, what would be the benefit of that? Right? Like, ooh, a real zinger. And now we're mortal enemies if we ever run it. Right? So the way it actually did end was at the very end, took a deep breath and I said, thank you. And to her credit too, I don't remember exactly what she said, but I remember feeling grace of exactly perfect.
Yeah.
You didn't say anything else.
Yeah. Yeah.
We just parted and it was like, ways. Okay.
Yeah.
We don't have to be enemies.
Yeah.
So that was nice. It ended up being, I think all in all, like a good experience. Good experience also to just remind me, hey, look, there's never an excuse, even if it's late, I would hope somebody would have that grace and just sort of recognize, hey, I'm just trying to make small talk. But, there's good small talk, there's bad small talk. And I could be better about how I try to initiate that small talk and make sure that I'm just being polite and kind and not just sort of not being inappropriate or lazy. Maybe that was it. It was sort of, it kind of snapped me back to, look, just try to be on point. You know,
Yeah.
don't get lazy.
But that's to your point at first that you were making, that it's hard when you're getting tired that late at night. I found myself having a difficulty just keeping up with the conversations that I was having with people.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times just sort of like nodding and being like, yeah, yeah. Like there were several times when I'd be like passing someone, or like when I was DJing, somebody would come up to me and start saying something, but it's like loud.
Mm-hmm.
Or, there's loud commotion, or they have like a really strong accent.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, and I ask them, what? Excuse me? And they say it again. And I'm like, nowhere near understanding what they sound. I'm like, yeah. It's just like,
my exercise was just not responding. Like, if the second time I asked what, I still didn't understand, I tried not to laugh and then get caught in some situation when she said, I say something else, I'm like, I'm even more confused. I just took the embrace if possible.
Right. I didn't necessarily have like a standalone embarrassing moment. I just had a lot of interesting sort of free fall moments when I just was kind of not sure where things were going to go, or how things were going to evolve with certain people, or how the conversations were going to flow. And I think later you and I talked about this, that I found that the most useful strategy for me became asking questions, like finding ways to ask people questions and getting the conversation coming from that intention of learning about people versus me talking. Mm-hmm. And that always helped. Mm-hmm. And I ended up having a set of really meaningful conversations, but one in particular that was this moment. I remember when I was catching up with a friend, and she was sort of bearing her soul in the middle of this performance that was going on behind me. And like, so everybody's like standing and they're watching the performance, and there's all this energy going to the stage. And I'm really aware that I'm turned the other way, but I'm like holding her hand, and she's just like having this moment. And so there was like this sort of hush between us where I was like really had to choose to be with her and not focus on anything else. And then there was all this commotion around us. So that strategy of asking the question, but then also, like you said, not being lazy and really staying present, because it was really challenging, and it was late too. And I was just like, part of me was like, okay, how long is this going to take? And then when she started tearing up, I was like, okay, I'm just going to be here. I have nothing to say. I can't say, I'm sorry, everything's going to be okay. Like I had no words to offer except just, sit there and wait and be present to the tension around that. Like, what is this experience going to be? Mm-hmm. And so, eventually it shifted, and there was a conclusion to it that was really interesting, where she just kind of gathered herself very quickly and then left, So I was kind of grateful that it didn't last longer, because for me, I'm sure everybody feels that way when you're talking to someone who's really having a hard time. Like, what's your role as the person there? Like your job is to be there to help them. It is within that realm, but it's like, you're not their therapist. You don't know what to do to say the right thing to say. So I did have a little bit of that nervousness, and I think it kind of happened several times that I ended up having these really deep conversations. And each time it was a little bit of that test for me to be like, okay, just be present. Don't run away. Don't try to be somewhere or do something different.
Right. I don't know if this is an aspect of milongas versus festivals or venues being, right. One was like a dance place.
Wait, milongas versus festivals?
Sorry, marathons versus festivals. Because to contrast the marathon versus the festival, the marathon was also at a location that's essentially a dance space versus a hotel for this festival. Or it's an issue of like the number of things that you can do much more at festivals versus the marathon tends to just be like 2 blocks of dancing. But I found that the festival created more of a feeling of a place where you can have an experience like that. Like it kind of still feels like a foggy haze. Like it was this sort of place where we kind of like packed up our stuff in the morning, went to the hotel, and it's like, we don't know how long we're going to be out here. Did we bring enough water? Did we get protein bars? Like, and you could kind of like go in and I found I did that a lot. I would have maybe 3 intense tandas, and I kind of need to like extricate myself and then kind of wander the halls a little bit, and then kind of pop in, grab some water, have a little conversation, and then kind of go back in for a string of dances. And that's kind of my ceremony. That's kind of like the experience for me. And I can imagine for this person who's having this tearful experience with you, that the festival kind of provided a little bit more of that environment, because people are just more disparate. You know? The classes, you know, people can be there for any number of things, but then at that Moanga, that evening Moanga, who knows what you're going to get? It feels like much more varied as to the experience you might have.
I was thinking about that actually, because this festival, from what I heard, and I need to confirm these numbers, but it sounds like the whole festival had about 600 people, and it was about 300 people at any time for the evening Moangas. Like Thursday we went there, and I was expecting Thursday night to be some, you know, quiet night where some locals are there, but Thursday night was like full energy of a Saturday night kind of Moanga. It was amazing. And it felt, I liken festivals sometimes to like train stations. Just feels like there's always people moving around. They're going in and out. People are leaving. People are coming. So there is that sort of impersonal experience a bit, where you go the whole weekend and there's this one person that you want to connect with, but you don't see them ever, because it's just like, your schedules are opposite, or they're the opposite part of the room, and you never make it over there.
I was amazed like, visiting other parts of the room. Like, oh my God.
There's like a whole...
Have you been here the whole time?
Like a whole different ecosystem existing.
Yeah, it's so big.
Yeah. And, but as you said, it provides a little bit of privacy when you do want to like withdraw. And also because there's so much dancing and there's so many hours that we're there, there's not that pressure like, oh, I need to make sure I dance this next tanda. You know, it's like, oh, whatever. There's going to be 2 more hours after this, you know? So I did find myself doing similar things where I would dance for a string of tandas, and then I would go and have a conversation with someone, sit at a table and maybe shoot some video, maybe just sit back and listen. But when we were at El Motivo, the contrast is pretty amazing because of the time limitation, right? It was only 8 hours a day. And we were only 8 hours a day as opposed to, well, what is it? It was like, let's see, 15 hours. Yeah, 15 hours a day. So it felt at the marathon, I remember any conversation I had, I was like, all right, let's make it quick. Come on, let's move it along. You know, I still wanted to catch up with people, which we haven't talked about, like the actual physical location, which is worthwhile mentioning because it plays such a big part in creating your experience at the event. With the marathon, there was a lot of opportunity to sit somewhere and kind of have an intimate conversation. It was always available right there. You didn't have to leave the building. There was always like somewhere a couch, a chair to sit in. But at the same time, anytime I sat down and set out a tanda, I was aware of it. And I was keeping track. I'm like, okay, that's the second song. I have about 30 more seconds until the cortina or whatever. Like I'm keeping track inside my mind to make sure that the next tanda I have a plan. Even if it's to ask the person that I'm talking to dance, right? But I'm like strategizing. But at the festival, I didn't really have that attachment to it because it was like, there's so much dancing. So you're strategizing before the next tanda. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
One thing I wanted to make sure we talked about in regards to the festival was this experience of the difference in the levels, because that was pretty stark.
Yes.
The marathon had a lot of out of towners, a lot of people that travel, as well as dancers in Los Angeles. But I remember talking with some guys later. I mean, it was like, we were making comparisons to, I don't know if it was the 26 Yankees, it's like murderer's row. Like, man, like, you see that table, like every one of them, I was like, I'm just going to look over in that general direction. And if any of them look over this way, it's a win. So
I love the idea of men at the Milonga making sports metaphors about tango dancers. I love it.
But yeah, so the level was different. What was your relationship to that difference?
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's definitely as black and white as it gets in tango, because you always have a spread at an event. There's always going to be a lower level and a higher level for sure. But this was the most stark you could possibly get of a contrast, because El Motivo was all like seasoned dancers. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're not advanced dancers, but everybody on the dance floor there. I mean, I maybe danced with 2 people who I would consider beginners in my book. And both were followers, which for followers is not as big of a deal as for leaders. There were no beginner leaders there, So the festival definitely drew a lot more beginners. And I think that's its purpose, which I think is important to remember, because a lot of times people will judge an event based on the level of the dancers. Mm-hmm. And you might say, oh, because this event draws more beginners, it means that I, as a more seasoned dancer, am not going to have fun, because there's not going to be as many good dancers, And so some people think that way and they'll make a decision. But it's not necessarily that direct, because I feel like even though it was an event mostly dominated by beginners, there were some advanced. Doesn't mean that I had a worse time.
And it was maybe more left skewed.
Left skewed, yes, sure. It doesn't necessarily mean I had a worse time. Like, the dancing that I did do was actually really good. And I felt a new sense of appreciation for a space where there are a lot of beginners, even though it might have meant that I didn't have as many advanced level tandas as I did at El Motivo, for example. It was just a different ecosystem altogether. So it didn't really bother me so much as a seasoned dancer going out to dance. So I'm curious what it was like for you as a leader.
Yeah. Honestly, sometimes at events like this, where there are a lot of maybe beginners, or a lot of maybe older women who just aren't dancing as much, sometimes you'll kind of get the feeling like, man, there's a lot to do here, but it feels like maybe it'll be a little bit of work. And at that point, sometimes I just kind of want to like leave, have that moment to myself to kind of recharge, and then come back in. I really like dancing with beginners, especially at festivals. I think sometimes, I've talked about this before, where when you can feel somebody transition from a place of being uncomfortable or not quite sure of their steps to being a little bit more confident in their steps, maybe sort of helping them get to a place where they're dancing as opposed to thinking about their dance, can be a really juicy moment. And I crave that, honestly. So you can have that a little bit more probably at a festival. But one of the differences I noticed between the two was mistakes. And what was kind of cool and counterintuitive was that mistakes were easier at the marathon.
Meaning easier to overcome, easier to deal with?
Well, in a way, to deal with. And they
were higher level mistakes.
Right, because sometimes when you're first dancing, it's really hard to see mistakes as a
Happy
process.
accidents.
Exactly. In an evolution of something you should only, not hope for, but sort of see as a gift that might create something new.
Right.
From mistakes come fruition, right?
Right.
So at a festival where there's a lot of beginners, that mistake becomes, oh, it's something I didn't do right. And then it kind of takes you out of the moment. Whereas I can remember at the marathon having a few more mistakes, so to speak, that just kind of became this thing where we laughed it off and kind of played with it and went into something else. And so those experiences where you're kind of, I don't know what the word was that you're almost like transcending, this feeling of like, the birth of something new. Those get important when you start to have this thought, which has creeped in for me recently, of like, man, I'm doing the same thing. My race is like this, and it's still this way, and it's just not quite what I want it to be. And the steps that I do are the exact same.
Yeah.
I bet if I saw myself on video, I'm doing the same double ocho cortado to the same moment in the same song, And so when you can break through that and have a mistake with someone and it kind of can develop into something else, that's a really rewarding experience. At a festival, it doesn't happen as often because those beginners feel like the mistake is just a mistake and you're just trying to correct as soon as possible from it.
In terms of the venue, it was also sort of like a black and white situation, like totally different setup, right? One is a venue dedicated to tango. Everything is designed for that activity. And one is like a hotel where everything's kind of brought in and taken out. And I think that the hotel definitely provides that experience of, it's nice to stay there and just go downstairs and dance. That's really nice. Also, you can have a large amount of people there at once. Right. So that kind of goes along with the mission of the festival. Yeah, and marathons don't usually happen at hotels, it seems. It seems like they're more commonly at a dance venue. I would have to agree. I think that might be a trend. I'm curious if our listeners would agree with that. Maybe if you have an opinion on this. Are there more marathons at dance studios than hotels these days? I mean, festivals? I can't imagine a festival that doesn't take place at a hotel, right? Well, the SoCal Tango Championship last year did not happen at a hotel, which is considered like a festival. Yeah. And it's considered a festival, though. It's a championship. It's a competition. So that really does kind of put it in a category of its own. But for festivals generally, and just if you kind of quickly Rolodex through festivals you've been to, probably going to be a hotel. For marathons, most of the ones that pop to mind for me are a dance venue. Maybe there's a few in hotels, but for the most part, it does seem like that's going to be a differentiating factor. Yeah, you might be right. And maybe it's because festivals, you need rooms for teaching and classes. So what was nice about the marathon that we really appreciated, because we had to drive there, and that was also a big difference in the experience, because I had to endure a lot more. You take the 10 to the 110, then go above downtown, then take the 5 back down south. Oh my God, the traffic. Holy crap. Get off at Burbank Boulevard. It was rough. So we would drive out there, and once there, you just sort of, like on Sunday, we spent the whole day there, and we ended up going and visiting some of the shops and went out to a restaurant, and then came back, and we were able to do some yoga and have that space to rest. And the whole event was also sort of decorated really nicely and very comfortable. And there was a lot of food that was provided for us, and there was always coffee. It was just kind of a posh experience in that way. Whereas at a hotel, especially this hotel, a lot of times they can't bring in their own food because it has to be catered by the hotel. And if it's catered by the hotel, typically it's like a cake and some coffee at one point, So we had to go get our own coffee because the coffee shop at the hotel closed at 1, which doesn't make any sense. 1 p.m. that is, not 1 a.m. 1 p.m. it closes.
Yeah.
So,
I saw some people who just missed it, and they were pretty mad.
Oh man, nothing makes tango dancers more upset if you close a coffee cart right in front of them the day after the milonga. So that added to a little bit of that stress of being at an event like that, because you got to think ahead. You're like, what am I going to eat? Where am I going to go to eat? Where am I going to get my coffee? Where am I going to rest? Whereas at the marathon, it was like everything's taken care of. I can just dance. Yeah. I can just focus on dancing. And yeah, so 2 very different experiences there. Which one is the right one for you? Which one is the right for that time period that you go and the people that you go with? I think the ultimate goal of this conversation for me was just to reflect on that every event has a particular reason behind it, right? No event is going to have everything right, everything that you want. It's all going to be a trade-off in certain respects. And the next one that we're going to is the SoCal Championship, which will be in Irvine.
That's
at a hotel in Irvine. I finally am getting the location right. Which will be cool because it'll be kind of LA, but we'll still kind of have the experience of getting away since we'll be staying. I know, it's like a little vacation, a little getaway. So if any of our listeners are going, we want to know, please let us know on our social media. My social media, I guess I'm making you part of my social media right now. You can find my social media. I'm So Tango. I am SO Tango anywhere on the interwebs.
And if you're trying to find my social media, don't. You're not ready.
Yeah, exactly.
The last little bit of the festival experience for me, the cool moment was one actually unrelated to the actual dancing. It was the moments in between dancing, and it was walking around Portland. Such a walkable place, and even though I had to cross a bridge to get into downtown.
And it was 38 degrees.
And it was 38 degrees.
Raining.
That was part of it. I was like, it's rainy, but I had a big coat. Fortunately, we brought gloves. I had a beanie. And, it was just a very different experience than LA. And it just reminded me that there's lots of other festivals that I want to go to. And there's lots of other places in the country and outside of the country that I want to visit and be able to have that kind of experience. Walk a city, meet people there at the venue and even people outside the venue.
Yeah, and that reminds me because we got to go to this place called Hopscotch.
Oh, yeah.
And that's such a special place. So to describe a little bit, it's like a bar. So imagine a bar and an art installation space together in one place.
Yeah.
So you go in, there's like a cover charge, I think it was $25 or something. You go in and then you can get alcohol and you can get food and you can mosey around in these rooms that have these light and sound interactive installations. Big shout out to Hopscotch. I think awesome place to visit if you're in Portland, just to take like a couple of hours and mosey around and be creative and spend time with friends, which is basically what we did, kind of hang out with some of our friends.
Get the popcorn. That was...
Oh my God, that popcorn.
The best popcorn. Of course, Portland would do something like popcorn a little extra.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just doused in butter topping, but it didn't feel like the butter topping at your local AMC, which we love.
We love our local AMC, yes.
But...
all right, go to Hopscotch, get the popcorn.
Yeah.
All right.
And a non-alcoholic beer.
Non-alcoholic beer. All right, we'll banter on next week, y'all. Ciao.